Hi, Alexandra.
Hello. Thank
Welcome to the
you.
What podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
Happy to have you, actually. So, I was just saying to you before we started that you are the first guest on our podcast who is not from our community and who isn't part of my coach development era. So, it's really neat to have you here. And yeah, and again, grateful you were referred to us actually by one of our students. So, why
Thank
don't you share, a little bit of
you.
your bio and who you are, and then we can have
Sure.
a
Well, thank you
conversation.
very much for having me. I feel very privileged to be your guest. I've been watching all the podcasts, and it's just some remarkable stories and remarkable people. So thank you
Mm.
very much. So my name is Alexandra Wright, and I have been a coach now for about a decade. I've had a long corporate communications career, a global career. I worked in London, England for a decade, worked for two blue chips, really, really fantastically interesting roles, very intense organizations and roles, worked with lots of senior leaders. And I eventually took a career break to raise my son, and but of course had itchy feet and wanted to do some other things and decided to pursue coaching. And at first, I thought to myself, I'm going to get a credential in coaching and sort of legitimize what I thought was already coaching
Right.
in organizations,
Mhm.
and quickly realized that there's obviously a completely different thing than mentoring and offering advice and counsel and the rest of it. So we moved back from the UK. We were in Vancouver and decided to do the Royal Roads program, executive coaching program, Royal Roads here on the coast. So at the time, it was a hybrid of in person and online. I think you can do it all online now, post pandemic. But yeah, I went through that journey, and of course, like any coaching journey, becoming a coach, it's as much about your own journey as it is about learning the skills of coaching. So I came out of that program in I guess it was about 2016, and started finding my way into coaching and building a practice, and thought to myself, wow, this is huge. This is a huge thing. It's a lot of, as I was saying to you before, it's a lot of responsibility to coach um, and to bring it all together. And so yeah, so I decided over the last decade, I have been doing a lot of training to kind of build out my coaching practice and really build something that reflects who I am and equally what I think um, the people I coach require and need. So it has been a really amazing journey. I Soon after I did the coaching program, I filled a lifelong dream of doing my yoga teacher training, and didn't really feel like the two were connected at the time. I mean, obviously, a lot of people talk about wellness and resiliency when they're in a coaching environment, but it was, they seemed a bit siloed. And then I got into the training and realized the two are so intertwined, and the process is so intertwined. Did the training not with the intention of being an instructor, but just bringing in the wealth of understanding of body, mind, and spirit, and how do I incorporate those into my coaching practice. And then I've been layering various trainings into that space, into my ever since. So I did my resiliency coach training, which was an ICF training that I stumbled upon, which was fantastic, and it really gave me a great foundation of everything in the resiliency space. And then I started taking. I mean, I'm sure, as you know, there are so many amazing courses
Yeah.
as a professional coach. I mean,
Hmm.
it's just never ending. So I did my resiliency coach training. I did my yoga teacher training. I did a training all about habits and how the brain works, which I mean, I could just take courses in that space forever and be happy. And
Yeah.
I also did some somatic coach training,
Mhm.
and I'm halfway through doing a master's in leadership at the moment. So yeah, so it's been layered. It's been interesting. I think there's a great synergy also between corporate communications and coaching, which I probably didn't recognize from the onset as well. And I used to try to keep the two separate, and now I realize, um, you know, they're so synergistic, and it's so important as a leader to be a great communicator, and to also, obviously have the whole array of leadership development tools alongside one's
Wow.
journey.
Yeah. So it's been about 10 years then since you've been
It
certified.
has, yes. It's about a
And
decade. Mhm.
yeah, and you've had a layered sort of experience of layering on a lot of different training. So
Yes.
what would you say to, an audience of people maybe who are developing their own coaching practices, maybe freshly out of a program or maybe still in a program? What's important about, how you position yourself to succeed as a coach?
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I, as I was saying before we came into the podcast, I'm a Royal Roads alumni coach. So um, pardon me, from time to time, I work with the individuals who are in the program themselves, and so we spend time together coaching, but then there's this whole other relationship that you create, and it gets more into the advice and advocacy space. And we have this conversation. So what does that look like? Because people are coming out of the program, I'm sure, just like out of your program, and you're coming out with such a high, and it's you just want to get going. And what I realized for myself was I wanted to get going, and I was offering coaching to, making it accessible to everybody and anybody, that I knew. And so I did that for a fair amount of time. I was offering coaching to individuals who, you know couldn't necessarily pay the rate that a coach can, um, legitimately charge. So I made it more accessible. And what I recognized for myself was that there was this group of individuals who were emerging leaders. And I could see that they were just in that space that they needed this opportunity. So I would say to, people coming out of a program, who where where do people need the support? What can you see from your network of, maybe perhaps it's not accessible, perhaps, so perhaps you have to discount, or you have to, exchange of services or whatever it is to get going. So it was beneficial in a number of ways, because I got to practice my craft. And I think it's so important to practice one's craft as much as possible, because you really understand yourself, and who you are. And there's sticky bits. It's you have to get into that rhythm, and that takes practice. And so you need as many people as possible to coach, coming out of a program, even with 125 hours or whatever it is that you need as a foundation to get through these courses. So that was one thing. And then I started exploring, and that's where I started thinking, okay, well, what are these pieces that interest me, that make my practice unique, as I'm coming out into this world of coaching? Because obviously there's a lot of coaches. And so who am I? What's lighting me up? And, what aspects of coaching, do I thrive in? And you can't be everything, and you can't be anyone. And so how do you become niche and create something that is unique? And I do think that that does take time, though. You really do have to coach people. You have to understand, yourself in that coaching relationship, and what are you, looking forward to? What are you not looking forward to? And then how do you find the space to create your own practice that draws in the clients that you resonate with, and you create this rapport and you're just on the same page. So that takes time as well. Um, so I think coaching as much as possible, really understanding yourself through that journey, and then starting to take the courses to support what your love is within that. So, for myself, it's been this iterative process of getting to a place where I have built a business called Lead Well, so leadership and wellness, bridging the two.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and, that took time and exploration. And um, I think I had a vision for it um, pretty early on, but it takes a long time to fully articulate it and build it. And you were talking earlier about how, you started your business with one course, and then, you layer it in from there. So
Mm-hmm.
I think keeping an open mind, understanding oneself, practicing as much as possible, networking as much as possible, um, and yes, continuing to study, read, explore,
Yeah.
find other coaches, have conversations, and
Mm-hmm.
I think being authentic is really important as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the reason we built community around our graduates, because we know that it's so important to stay connected to your skills, your development, and your community, like your network, right? Other coaches, and offering that unlimited hours of practice that you can get
Oh,
from
fantastic.
peer coaching. And we have skills labs and clinics and
Oh,
live coaching demos and debriefs and psychology of coaching and
yeah,
supervision and mentorship, all through a community membership where people can stay connected to
that's fantastic. That's
those.
amazing.
Yeah, and so one thing that I heard you say though was networking, which I hear so much, and of course I know what that is, but what I think a lot of coaches don't know is what that means. What does it mean to network? Like, how do you put your name out there? How do you make that build momentum, create relationships that can help you to
Mhm.
ultimately establish yourself as a coach in business?
And I think it's a good question, and it's really interesting because we had this time where a lot of networking was really tricky during the pandemic, and I think a lot of people, they stopped networking, they stopped getting out there, and then they just never got back to it. And it does often take quite a lot of effort above and beyond what your day is, right? So
Mhm.
you've you know got to find it within yourself to say, okay, well, I've been at it all day since 8 o'clock in the morning, and now I'm going to go and have um, a cup of coffee with someone. But I do think it is incredibly powerful to really connect with people and meet with people and have conversations. I think Zoom is fantastic, but truly connecting with people in person is a really powerful thing, and really finding the motivation in oneself to make it happen and book it in. There's a lot of different events. So, I imagine a lot of your students and former students, are members of ICF chapters across Canada with various meetups. And it's fun. It's fun to have a conversation and sit down with people. And I just went to one last month where I literally knew no one, and all these people coming out of the woodworks that are in the same space, so to speak. But you often have a different niche, and so perhaps, they know somebody that they can, it's about referrals as well, right? So, they know somebody that isn't, they're not the right coach for that person. Um, so how do you, find that person? Where are you going to find that person that is the right coach for your potential, for your client that you're not the right one for, if that makes sense. And so, it's about going out there, having conversations, building rapport, collaboration. I think collaboration is really, really key. That's something we do. So Lead Well, my business is about leadership development. We offer trainings and strategy and retreats and various things in that space. And, you can't do it alone, and nor would I want to. And so I work really closely with a woman named Katie. She's a wellness expert, but we collaborate with lots of different people to offer, unique, um, all sorts of different unique content. I think also, especially when you're working with, a wide array of individuals, obviously you can't coach all of them either. And, ethically, nor should you. Team coaching is one thing, but if it's one-on-one coaching, you need support. And so yes, networking, meaningful networking, I do think personally it's very powerful in person. It's about following up. Perhaps it's group networking and then following up and having conversations, sidebar conversations, coffees, exploring. There's usually something that comes out of it. You can figure out the next step. Maybe it's not with them, but maybe they have an introduction to make. And then I think it's also, exploring. There's so many thought leaders in this space.
Mm-hmm.
Following thought leaders on, LinkedIn and Instagram, etc., within the leadership space or the coaching space, um, and contacting people that are in, following them as well, or have commented, or perhaps there's a synergy there, reaching out within that community as well. So I think those basics really go a long way. I think it's really
Yeah.
important for when you're networking to really understand what your elevator pitch is, being able to articulate who you are and what you're offering and what makes you unique, and what's memorable within that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and something that you said stood out was the follow-up, because I think when people go to conferences, it's easy to meet people, I suppose. Maybe not easy, but you can put yourself in front of people, start talking, and it's the after. What do you do after? I think like you're here today because of a follow-up
Yes,
connection you made at
completely.
the CF conference, right? So without that follow-up and follow through, you
Mhm.
wouldn't, you're letting go. And I think that's a piece that it may seem obvious, but I think that's where a lot of people drop off when they think, what do why am I not meeting or expanding my network? Well, it does require those coffee dates that you plan and attend, and those kinds of relational efforts that we make. And I've heard it consistently. I've heard it from you. I've heard it from other coaches who are established and running great practices, that it's about getting your name out there. It's about letting people know your name, right? And really, like you said, having a clear idea of what it is that your value proposition is. Those are very
Mhm.
basic steps, but you can't do it without those steps, I don't think.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes it can be obtuse as well. Like, I think keeping an open mind and going into the conversations and having those follow-up
Yeah.
conversations, thinking to yourself, I don't know, going into the conversation what my ask is, or, what,
Mhm.
but, just having that free flowing conversation. And then perhaps the person's like, well, perhaps I can introduce you to someone because you just triggered something. And I think it has to be two-way as well. So how
Mhm.
can you support that person that's spending their time sitting with you and being open and sharing their network? What can
Yeah.
you, in return, how do you add value? But, I do believe it is like a matrix of sorts, and there's, you know, so many relationships that can be built off of one interaction that begins. So, but it does take time, it does take effort, it does take, finding clarity within oneself, and being able to go out and present that effectively.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so then with the training that you're a PCC level coach,
Yeah,
correct? Right.
correct.
And I'm curious to know what role, if any, supervision has had in your development as a coach. Because I'm dabbling more and more in the realm of supervision, and I feel like it's had a really supervision has a very strong place in European culture in coaching, but not as much in North America.
Yeah.
I wonder what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting space. I have a friend who's a coach that is in Amsterdam, and she very much talks about this space of supervision within coaching. And you know, I don't know if I can speak to it properly because I don't know if I've explored it properly enough. And you start to see it referred to more so in ICF in particular, I would say. Um, but I don't know, like for myself, I don't have as much experience speaking to it or like
Mhm.
experiencing it. I'm curious how if I'm allowed to ask that question in a podcast, how you're
Everybody's always like, am I allowed to ask you a question? Yeah. It's okay. Yeah. Supervision for me. Well, so two of our facilitators in our community are certified supervisors, accredited supervisors. And so it took me some time to understand exactly what the, the offer was with supervision. And now today, as I actually explore my own, looking for accreditation, starting to look at who's in the marketplace for that. And having been with a supervisor, actually being supervised, which I think is a funny word to call it, because I think what it is really taking apart how you show up to a coaching session and really focusing inward on what are you bringing or not bringing, what's in your way, your own bias, how is it showing up, how is it impacting the conversation, and what you even notice, how you listen, the lens you listen from, and so forth. So it's really fascinating and I think super important work for coaches
Yes.
to
Yes.
have that, so it's more than coaching,
Yes.
it's
I
awareness.
yeah, I mean, through the process of doing both the coaching program at Royal Roads and my PCC, there is that mentor coaching aspect where you have, senior coaches, you know, watching that process, right? And then, and so with PCC, um, journey to PCC, I worked with a MCC coach who I spent 6 hours with her, but I'd also just taken a master's level somatic coaching course through Royal Roads. So I had 4 hours of a professor's guidance and watching me coach other individuals. So it is so imperative and it's so important. So there were 10 hours involved in the PCC journey of, I guess that's supervision.
It's mentorship. It's not
That's
supervision.
mentorship. Yeah. So it's different.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know where one begins and one ends. And so
Yeah.
sorry.
No, I don't know how we ended up here, but I thought I'd ask you what if it had a role at all in your development, because I think I see
No, it
coaching
has.
a lot more. I see it becoming a lot
Yeah.
more
I
of a
see the
topic.
language and maybe that's one of the things that needs to be maybe more defined, within the world of coaching. Like how does
Mhm,
it differ?
mhm,
Um, and when should when should it come into play with what coaches?
mhm.
If you know what I mean.
Yeah.
We're in that journey.
Mhm. So what is next for you in terms of your development and your, what do you have your eye on?
Yeah. Well, I mean the list of potential certifications, credentials, it's just never ending. And I think there's so much that is additive within the coaching space that you can build into what you're offering, especially, so I do one-on-one coaching, but I've been building this leadership development entity for quite a long time now. And so there's so many different things you can build into it, into the leadership development space. And, there's so many things that light me up. Because when you start looking at leadership and the connection with wellness, there's just a multitude of things. And obviously, wellness is having a huge moment in the world, and people are paying a lot of attention to it. And how do you bring that in a sophisticated way into the workplace? Because obviously, social media, there's a gazillion things going on in social media, um, with very legitimate, credible people within the wellness space. But how do you then bring it into a workplace environment and make it real for people? Especially, people can feel very intimidated or, um, nervous about embracing wellness, or, just don't know, it's not part of their world. So there's a huge variety of things in that space that I'm continuing to pursue. And so I'm working on my master's of leadership now, and
Right.
I actually paused it
Mm,
because I paused it for being paused for since the autumn session, because I felt like I had taken in so much information that I needed to integrate it and really
mm,
understand where I'm at and what do I want to do, because the second half of the Masters of Leadership is all about creating a project, an entity where you're pouring all your resources and building, this thesis of sorts. And so what does that look like, and what am I hoping to achieve with it? I didn't want to just plow through it. I wanted it to be meaningful and truly reflective of um, what the end user needs. And so really understanding what the world needs, and then how does this project, fit that. So, but I also needed to kind of reflect on where I was at and how do I integrate all these different things that I've been building and building into my practice over the course of a decade. And that's
mm,
so I'm taking that space, and it's been really helpful. So instead of just signing up for, like, you know there's so many courses you could just sign up for something on a daily basis, really thinking about where are the gaps, and what do I want my practice to evolve to, and how do I get out of the day to day and start, and live and build something strategic? Because I think when you have a business, it's so easy to get kind of caught up in the day to day and the delivering. So I think there are some gaps. And I think the masters will be helpful for some of the big pieces for sure. Um, but kind of really figuring out what is next, what is missing, and how do I think sometimes when I'm coaching and I'm having conversations and thinking about things, I can't, there's the gap in articulating what's missing. And so I like positive psychology is something that really resonates for me, exploring that space. I think it's a really interesting, truly interesting space, and it's getting a lot of attention. So building in aspects of positive psychology in a more organized way into what I'm delivering. Because I think I touch on it already, but like really informing myself and getting some, training in that space would be one of the things.
mm,
Um, I think also, so I've been taking, as I alluded to before, I've been taking some training about basically the brain and habits, but the entity that I've been taking the training from, um, they offer a whole suite of things. And I think that whole space is very, very interesting. One of the tenets of Lead Well, and really everything, is that everything is evidence based, science led, evidence based content. And so, using that as a guideline, I think is really important. But if you said to me there were no barriers, I think I'd probably be signing up for that I don't know if you've seen it. It's a Master's in Happiness.
Oh,
And
yeah.
have you seen that? I think,
No.
or it's like, I think it's like at Harvard, or it's a prestigious US university. And I mean, it's bringing in a lot of this, right? Um, a lot of what's already on the periphery of the coaching space that a lot of people are already embedding into their practices, but you can come out with a credential in happiness. Like, how do you find your happy? And that is always something that I look at when I coach. That's one of my philosophies. How do you help people shift forward so that they can, bridge into their vision and live their happy self? Um, so yes, that's kind of where I'm at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Was it Sean Anker who wrote the Happiness Project? I can't remember who wrote that, but in the conclusion was happiness equals progress. So
Absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah.
And like, if you look at the business case of why it's important for the workplace to embrace leadership development and coaching and all these things that make people happy. There's the business case is remarkable. People are quiet quitting every day, or just plain quitting, or working at 30%. There's so many different things, and even if you are a happy employee and you're there, but you don't understand who you are and where you want to get to, and don't understand what the organization's vision is, then you're missing the opportunity, right? You can be so much more effective as an organization.
Yeah, and I'm curious because it sounds like you have a lot of experience bringing these workshops into organizations for, a coach who's starting out in that space, pitching, an idea. What are some objections that you come up against? Like you talked about a few when it comes to wellness in like
Yes.
organization space, and
Mhm.
what are some of the ways that you worked around those objections?
Yeah, and I think I was just alluding to it before. The business case. Organizations. It's about the bottom line, and so if you can show the value that you're adding, and make it, build a business case with all the evidence that is out there to support why coaching, why leadership development, why kind of some of the softer aspects, so to speak, softer aspects of this journey are important, and how that affects employee satisfaction, how that affects productivity. There's a whole host of statistics out there, very easily accessible. I think starting with the business case, because that's where businesses start. It has to align with the business case for doing it. So once you, I think, once you connect and speak their language, because I think it's really important to speak, um, workplace language, that you understand what their, you understand why they need it, and what are their, pain points. If you can identify those, articulate those back to them, and then explain how what you're offering will help shift the dial forward, and help them progress and move forward, then that is, that will go a long way. It might take some time. Organizations are complex and busy places, but how do you get on their agenda, when their agenda is already very full? So really thinking about what is the value you add is, I think, imperative.
And who's the person so you said agenda, which is really smart. Who's the person that you need to keep your eye on to connect with? Like, what's your way in?
Yeah, who's the buyer within an organization? So I think there's, so I've, you know, I have had, I've worked for decades, in the corporate sector, and so I've been growing my business organically,
Mhm.
and um, mostly organically. But I think so. I've had that privilege of knowing a lot of people and having like, lots of LinkedIn contacts, etc., and quietly opening doors and saying, can we come in and test this or do this? And then you kind of, get your foot in the door and then expand on it from there. Or they say, actually, perhaps talk to my friend who's at, a similar type of company, etc. So you network from within that, and it's been very organic, with the aim of being more overt, I think, going forward. But that's how we've started. But the buyer is, I think there's a few different buyers. I think, visionary leaders, that are already, so looking at an organization, you can tell from the outside if the senior leadership gets the space, and they're probably already open to it and experience something like this. And if you can connect with those individuals or with people around them that influence the senior leadership team to get them to really understand the value of what you're adding, because they're already there, right? It's kind of like we offer retreats, not only for corporates but for individuals. And the people signing up for retreats, you don't have to drag them to a retreat. They get it. They get it. They're already in that space, so it's a lot easier to sell them. But I think there's also, often the buyer is the HR team, who are often overwhelmed. They have, I think HR have they wear many hats. They're trying to fulfill a very tactical function because they're literally like, doing a million things that have to be done in order for the organization to take along, get people paid, hire, let go of people, all these different things. But then they are also now responsible for employee satisfaction and ensuring that, people are happy and figuring out how they're happy or why they're not happy. And so if you can help solve their problem, because they're overwhelmed and don't know where to begin, I think that is doing them a huge service. Sometimes that creeps also into the role of people responsible for, in large organizations like environment, health, and safety. So they have, what safety of employees or training, leadership training and development. Sometimes that's in a slightly different place in an organization, but you're helping them solve a problem because they are well aware of what the business case is because they're living it every day, and they see the gaps, but they don't necessarily know where to begin. Mm-hmm. Because it's different than the EAPs that are out there, the employee assistance plans. It's different than all of things that might already be inside. So they don't have to craft it themselves, but you can come alongside and offer something. Yeah, and partner.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm noticing the time, and unfortunately, I have like a class to teach, so I don't have the luxury of spending our time together. But I would like to ask you, how do people reach you? And
Sure.
A website, and we can put it in the show notes as well.
Sure. Thank you very much. So best way to reach me is at Alexandra at leadwellbytheory.com.
Okay.
And I can send you a note with those.
Yeah.
Of what that is. You can also follow us on Instagram at leadwellbytheory. And our website is being updated at this point in time, but it is still active and live. And you can go on it. It's www.leadwellbytheory.com.
Great. And you're also on LinkedIn. People can.
I am on LinkedIn, of course. And you can find me there under Alexandra Wright, and it says Vancouver. So thank you very much. I really
thank you for the time. Thanks for spending this almost hour with me.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I really appreciate it. And I'm fascinated with your organization. So I really look forward to following you and learning more. It sounds like you've got a really well
super blessed every day to wake up to a beautiful community.
Yeah, that sounds remarkable. So and I love learning from, so it sounds very well thought out. I look forward to learning from you.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you so much for doing this and for our audience. I think that you value in terms of your experience and your trajectory in your career. I think it's always helpful for, new coaches to know, how are other people doing it? How did you
Yes.
build that? And what are some tips and tricks? And I think you often.
Absolutely. And I do invite anybody to reach out and talk to me. I think it's really important to, um, yeah, connect with as many people as possible and understand their trajectory and their story. And I'm happy to share that in more detail with anyone.
Well, thanks so much.
Thank you. Much appreciated. Take care. Bye bye.
Bye.